Happy Friday, fight fans, and welcome to Inside the Fence, brought to you by No Game Schedule, the exclusive UFC breakdown brought to you here on this channel. I'm John Mastej, joined alongside No Game Schedule's chief UFC and fighting analyst, Drew Johnsen. Your title, I'm going to change your title every single episode we do. I'm going to add more words. Probably about like UFC 20, you're going to have like a 50-word long title, and I'm going to print you a business card with everything on it. Drew, thank you once again for joining me. I really enjoyed doing this last time, and hopefully we can continue to grow this.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure to be here on the channel, and love talking some fights. So anytime you need me here.
Well, let's not wait any longer. We have an excellent main card this week for UFC 313, obviously headlined by Pereira and Ankalaev. But let's talk about some other things first before we get to the main card. You just mentioned, I always ask you this, that hey, is there anything in the prelims worth watching? Because, I mean, people really don't watch the prelims. Obviously, incredible fight fans like yourself do, but I'd say the average viewer like myself doesn't care too much. But you said you had a little gold nugget in the prelims that you wanted to talk about. Go ahead with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So on this fight actually takes us to the second fight of the night on the early prelims. It's gonna be Chris Gutierrez, John Castaneda. Castaneda was supposed to fight last week, but his opponent wasn't cleared by the Nevada State Athletic Commission. So he actually is fighting a short notice fight against another guy named Chris Gutierrez. They're both really good. They're both really good all around mixed martial artists. I think Castaneda Gutierrez will be one of those fights where you just see fireworks really early in the night, and that sets up the whole rest of the card for, a really good experience to sit down and watch.
From my experience, I mean, we've seen this happens. I mean, not every card, but all the time where, you get those short notice fights, some guy can't make weight, some guy gets checked for steroids, and then, they had to pull just some guy in. Maybe he makes his UFC debut. Maybe he's just a young guy. And I often find that those fights are actually, how do I say this? It's more pure, right? Because typically the way I look at it is you got these two guys who are training to fight a specific person for 3 months, however long it is, 6 months, maybe a year, depending on who you are. But then it's just, hey, you have 3 days, 2 days, 24 hours to prepare for an opponent, sometimes even less than that. And literally all you have to rely on is just you as a straight fighter, truly a pound for pound contest. And I think that's what we might get here tonight in this early prelim. So if you have the time and you're off work in time for that tomorrow, if you are working, I know it's Saturday. You blue collar folks out there, we appreciate you. Definitely tune into that one. Let's jump up to the main card. We'll start from bottom to top. We're starting out with a lightweight bout with King Green versus Mauricio Ruffy out of the United States versus Brazil. Does King Green have tattoos on his head? Is that what I see?
Yeah, so
psychotic.
Yeah,
I wouldn't get in the ring with that guy if my life depended on it.
Absolutely. This guy's making pro fight number 50 coming on Saturday. So 50 pro fights. That's a pretty impressive thing. I mean, he's 32-16-1, but you have a guy that's fought 50 times at the pro level. You can't ever count him out, especially coming in as such a big dog. I mean, he didn't look great against his last fight against Paddy the Baddy. He got submitted in the first round. Dude didn't tap. He went out cold. He just out cold. And then he's fighting Mauricio Ruffy, who trains with the fighting nerds out of Brazil. I'm sure you're familiar. The guys that always wear the glass with tape on the nose.
Yes, I am. I know just enough about that. But
yeah,
I mean, compared to you look at these two guys. I mean, obviously, you just read the matchup stats and you just look at record. You're talking about a guy making his 50th appearance versus a guy making his 13th.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is going to be Mauricio Ruffy's only his third fight in the UFC. And I feel like I'm going to call him Bobby Green because he changed his name to his nickname. But Bobby Green is almost like the gatekeeper of the lightweight division. I mean, he's always been somewhere near the bottom, like 10 to 15 ranked is almost his whole career. But he seems like everybody that gets a shot at that lightweight belt that's currently owned by Islam Makhachev has to go through Bobby Green first. I mean, a lot of guys that that want to work up, getting shot in the 15, top 10, top 5, go through this guy.
They have to go through him.
And he's also derailed a lot of guys that were riding that hype train high. Like one fight I remember is the Grant Dawson fight. Grant Dawson, I think, was about a minus 400 favorite going into that fight. Bobby Green knocked him out in the first 30 seconds of the fight. I mean, you talk about a guy that's always had the odds stacked against him, somehow manages to, just pull out a vicious knockout or a submission or even a decision win as a huge underdog. I think I got to go with Bobby Green on this fight. I mean, I know Mauricio Ruffy's team is amazing, but you talk about a guy who's coming off a fight that he's just pissed off to no end. You could put him in there and he could just, perform another one of those shocking upsets. I think he could even win by knockout.
I like the term you use there, gatekeeper. I think that's a really good expression. I would use the term, I mean, it's kind of the same thing, but like the litmus test. He's the guy that you kind of have to be like, do you deserve to be here or not? I think every division, every weight class, men and women, have that one person. I think Bobby Green's been in that position for so long. He's like kind of the pinnacle of that, of like you said, the gatekeeper. That's a good term. I'll continue to use that. So you're taking Green on this one.
I am, even as a plus 350 dog. I think that someone has to believe in the underdog, and especially when the underdog's Bobby Green, it's really hard to count him out.
Let's move on to the only women's fight of the main card, a women's strawweight bout. Number 5 versus number 7, Amanda Lemos versus Yasmin Lucindo. Two Brazilians going up against each other. I can't even tell you the last time I saw two people from the same country fight each other in a UFC match. It's been a while. It's just my memory. I don't know if it's actually been a while, but I can't tell you the last time I've seen that. Odds on right now is Lemos plus 114 and Lucindo minus 135. Break this fight down for us, Drew.
So you have neither one of these girls made weight this morning, which is a big thing. Lemos came in a pound heavy. Lucindo came in 2 pounds heavy. Neither one of them did make weight this morning, which is kind of interesting seeing these two fighters that seems to have always made weight. Lemos, she's 1-2 in her last 3 fights. She lost to Zhang Wei Li at what was that? That would have been, I think it was 287, if I'm not mistaken. That was the night that O'Malley won the belt against Aljamain Sterling. She beat Mackenzie Dern by decision, but then she got submitted by Verna Jandiroba, I think in the second round of their or second or third round of their headliner fight. But Lemos has a lot of power for this weight class. She might not be the best with grapplers, but I have a feeling in this fight she's going to punch her way out of it. I mean, Lucindo's a really good fighter, but it seems like her past couple fights she's etched out a couple really close split decisions that I didn't think she won. I mean, she's not known as a grappler. She's more of a striker that's got good enough grappling to where if the fight goes to the ground, she's going to manage to find her way on the top. But I think Lemos, even being 14 years older than Lucindo, could potentially punch her way out of this fight and win by decision. 14
years is a pretty solid age gap for UFC fighters. You look at their records, Lemos coming in at 14-4-1, Yasmin coming in at 17-5-0. The height, it's the height and reach, I mean, I know it's a game of inches. I know it's a football term, but you can apply it to the UFC. But 5'4" versus 5'3", you got a 65-inch reach versus a 66-inch reach. It's not too big of a difference. But like you said, this is going to be a striking versus a grappling match. And I think whoever is able to get their fighting style off first, whoever can force the way they want the match to go onto their opponent, I think walks away with this one. I haven't done enough research. I did research on the last 3 fights, so I'll leave this one to you. Who you take in final decision between these two fighters?
Before we get into that, I want to just correct myself. I said earlier, I said neither one of these girls made weight. They actually did. The UFC website has not been updated yet, but everybody... all 24 athletes weighing in this morning did make weight. So that's one thing. That's one thing that we have to look forward to, because last week I think we had 4 or 5 guys that just didn't make weight, and some were even close.
What happens if they don't make weight?
So there's a couple different things that can happen. Is that if both fighters don't make weight, they can make it at what they call a catch weight fight. So say your fight was supposed to be at 135, which is the bantamweight limit. You can weigh in at 136 unless you're in a title fight. Then you can only be half a pound over. Say a guy comes in at 138, one guy comes in at 136 or 137, they could call it a catchweight fight at 140 pounds. However, on the other side of that coin is if one guy doesn't make weight but the other one does, they can agree to fight, but the guy who didn't make weight could lose anywhere from 30 to 50% of his purse, and it goes to the guy that made weight. Say your show, so like your basic contract could be like you get X amount of money to show and X amount of money to win. So if you show up and you make weight and you fight, you get that money. It doesn't matter if you lose or win. Now your win is the same as your show, but you'll get paid that only if you win. So like even if the guy comes in 4 pounds heavy and wins the fight, half of his total earnings from that fight, including bonuses, go to the other guy. So, it's kind of up to both of them if they want to fight. I've seen fights get scrapped because a guy is 2 pounds over. I've seen both guys come in at 5 pounds over and fight. Like I've seen both sides of that coin.
Did you just say it's an agreement between the two fighters? Like you just said, if they're both 5 pounds overweight, I mean, it's the same. It's equal fighting. So, can they both agree? Like, hey, we'll just keep it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's usually what happens. When both guys come in heavy, they'll call it a catchweight fight. Usually, it doesn't happen the morning of weigh-ins. Usually, like weigh-ins are for us. It's Friday morning, about 11 o'clock. If for your typical Vegas card, usually on Wednesday or Thursday, you'll see someone tweet out this fight's moved to catchweight. It could be an issue with someone cutting weight. That you have to get cleared by the commission after you weigh in to be able to fight. So if you have a terrible weight cut, the commission might not clear you to fight. Like say like you pass out on the scale, you're obviously not going to get cleared to fight. But
the dehydration techniques that fighters use, I predict, I don't know what you think about this. We don't have to talk about this today, but I predict like that's going to get outlawed in the next couple years because it's just dangerous. It's just dangerous for the fighters.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen title fights called off because the guy just can't make weight. Like I remember it happened with Khabib Nurmagomedov once. Chris Cyborg once in her UFC days had a fight called off because she just couldn't make weight. But I almost feel like it's going to go to somewhere like with the rehydration clause in boxing. I don't know if you're too familiar, but where you have to weigh in on the day before, but on the day of the fight, you can't be over X amount of weight. Like you can't rehydrate so much. Like I almost have a feeling that could eventually come to the UFC, but I don't see that happening really anytime soon.
So final words on Amanda versus Yasmin. Who you taking?
I think I'm going to back the dog again, John. I really think that Lemos could punch her way out of this. I mean, I think she's only a plus 114 dog because she's 1-2 in her last 3 fights. But she lost to 2 of the best girls in her division, and one of them I think is one of the best female mixed martial artists in the world, in Wei Li. And she went the distance with Wei Li. I mean, not a lot of girls have gone the full 25 minutes with Wei Li and come out looking somewhat okay where you're not cut and battered and bleeding. I mean, she wrestled with Wei Li, and I think she won 2 of those rounds against Wei Li in, the later fight. But at the same time, it's like if Lucinda takes her to the ground and just does a lay and pray for 15 minutes, she can pull it out. But with the power Lemos has, I really think that Lemos is going to be able to pull this one out and probably win by decision.
Let's move on to the lightweight bout for the men's. Jalen Turner versus Ignacio Bahamondes. Turner coming in at plus 105 and Bahamondes coming in at minus 125 United States versus Chile. Turner is number 13 and Ignacio is currently unranked at this moment, but he is the favorite for this fight. I watched a little bit of Bahamondes fights prior to starting the show today. This guy can kick, man. This guy can knock you out with his toes, and that's something that's very scary. And Turner, I felt after looking at his stuff, has really struggled to defend against guys whose main form of fighting is kickboxing. That's my interpretation. What do you think about this fight here?
I see it about the same. I mean, you look at some of the guys that Turner has fought. Like I said, remember we talked earlier about Bobby Green. He knocked out Bobby Green. So now he's number 13 after having beat Bobby Green. But at the same time, he also lost his last fight at UFC 300 to Renato Moicano, who just fought Islam for the belt in short notice. I feel like Jalen Turner is a really good fighter, but I've seen where he wrestles the entire first round, his gas tank kind of goes, and he seems to get finished a lot in the second round. I mean, Ignacio Bahamondes is a really good fighter. I remember watching him at Noche UFC at 306 back in September, and he came out against Manel Torres and just looked so good. Those kicks and those punches and his overall style is really, really good. I have a feeling this is going to be your classic, almost like your grappler versus striker match. However, even though Jalen Turner lost his last fight and doesn't have as good of a gas tank, I feel like his wrestling is good enough to where he could almost edge out a decision. But I don't think it's going to be a 30-27. I see it being 29-28 Turner across the board, maybe split. But I see Turner winning this fight.
I mean, you look at just I didn't even think about this until now, but I think Turner, like I just said, struggles with opponents who really lean into kickboxing, and I think the reason for that is so he's at 6'3", right? I mean, so is Bahamondes, but you look at his reach on both his arms and his leg reach. Arm reach 77 inches, leg reach 46 inches. He outbeats Bahamondes in both categories, and so I think the problem he has, and first of all, a 77-inch reach is a lot. That's big. I mean, for in terms of UFC. Problem is, like, I think he's so used to staying back and being that striker that when someone actually does get a shot off on him, I don't think he's fully prepared for that. And I think that's what we're going to see in this fight tomorrow. I'm going to take Ignacio on this one. I mean, you talk about a guy who is unranked. He's still trying to work his way in here. Better record is not really something you can look at. But you're talking about a guy in Turner who's coming off of a loss. And I think mentally that's a struggle to have. I know a lot of guys feed into it like, oh, I lost this last match, so I got that thing in me, that drive. I don't want to lose another one. But I think there's just too many factors here for Ignacio to not lose this match, and that's who I'm personally going with. Let's move up to the second to last fight of the night. Justin Gaethje versus Rafael Fiziev. This is a good fight. I mean, on paper, in theory, this is going to be a very good fight. Gaethje comes in plus 136, and Fiziev comes in at minus 126. United States versus, I'm not even going to pretend like I know how to say where Fiziev is from. This is a number 3 fight versus a number 11. So you got two ranked opponents who more than likely, if Justin Gaethje wins this one, he more than likely gets a title shot his next fight. And same thing can maybe be said about Fiziev. Depends on who else happens in the rankings. Talk about it, Drew.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about Fiziev. So this is Fiziev's first fight back in, let me see, how many, make sure my math's correct. I think it's 18 months. He last fought in September of 2023, blew out his ACL on his lead kicking leg against Gamrot in their main event. I really like Rafael Fiziev. I've watched pretty much all of his UFC fights. He's really, really good. And this is actually a rematch against Gaethje. They've fought once before. Yeah. So the odds on this fight don't make any sense to me. Gaethje won their first fight. Fiziev's coming off of a really bad injury on his lead kicking leg. However, Gaethje was on the end of probably one of the worst knockouts we've ever seen in the UFC. I remember me and you were watching that fight at UFC 300 when Max put him out with 1 second left. That was the absolute craziest knockout I've ever seen. I do not think I will ever see one that tops that. I mean, I think that even tops both of the knockouts in both fights with Izzy and Pereira.
Yeah, I just don't see one of the best. That's one of the best knockouts. I mean, I hate to bring this up. I don't want to be that guy who's just trendy, but like Conor McGregor knocking out Jose Aldo in 13 seconds is the greatest knockout in UFC history. I'm sorry, I hate to admit it, but Justin Gaethje, first of all, Holloway just points to the center of the mat and says, "Let's go." Why on earth you would accept that challenge? I got no idea. But I think that's what everyone wants to see in the UFC is, hey, right now, you and me, let's throw hands. Just didn't go his way. But good point. I forgot about that, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Gaethje has fought some of the best guys in the division. I mean, he fought Khabib Nurmagomedov, and to this day, you can look in a lot of interviews that Khabib has talked about. He said Justin Gaethje hits the hardest of any lightweight I've ever fought. He said he hits like a truck, and I think that's 100% true. I think you put any guy in a boxing exchange with Gaethje that isn't named Max Holloway or Ilia Topuria, I think Gaethje will floor you. I mean, I thought Max had an iron chin. I mean, the first time he ever got knocked out was when he fought Ilia for the belt and just came up short. But I mean, how much does that knockout going to affect Gaethje coming into this fight? I mean, I really think I have to go with Gaethje on this one. I mean, experience alone. I mean, you talk about a guy that has almost twice the amount of, or more than twice the amount of pro fights as Fiziev does, and has gone up against the best guys in that division. I mean, he's had 2 title shots. He lost to Khabib Nurmagomedov, and he lost to Charles Oliveira, both by submission. But those are arguably 2 of the greatest lightweights to ever fight in the UFC. I mean, you talk about just strength of schedule almost, and Gaethje just seems to outclass Fiziev in every way.
I'm going to agree with you on that one, just for a separate reason. I'm taking Gaethje as well, only because you got to look at the injury to Rafael. Listen, anything above the waist for a UFC fighter can get worked out and fine-tuned pretty easily, because upper body injuries, it's not as mental, right? But lower body injuries, would you say ACL? Was that what he
ACL?
Blew out?
Mm-hmm.
All right, shout out Kyrie Irving, by the way, man. Hopefully you recover from that. We talked about it on the main show this week, but you talk about an ACL, and we talked about this last episode. I can say this firsthand: when you have a lower body injury, you never mentally recover from that, and I do mean you never recover from that, because you need that. That's your base. It's your lower body is your foundation to how you live your life, and so subconsciously, and we've seen this in the UFC numerous times. We talked about this last episode for 312. If you have a lower body injury, fighters are never the same, because whether it's their plant leg, their kick leg, they are not going to put as much force into it. And so this is your first fight back, and this is I think psychologically, I don't think Rafael's honed for this one, so I'm going to give it a Gaethje. Let's talk about the main fight, the marquee fight, the one with all of the marketing and promotions on it, the light heavyweight title bout. The champion defender, Alex Pereira, versus the number one contender, Magomed Ankalaev. Odds are coming in. This makes absolutely zero sense to me. Pereira coming in at -112 and Ankalaev coming in at -108. What I interpret that is this is a coin toss. This is really going either way. Just depends on what happens. This is a big fight. You and I are both huge Alex Pereira fans. I love to watch him fight. He's only 12-2 in the UFC, going up against Ankalaev, who is 21-1 with one no call. Both coming off of wins. This is a fight that I think people are going to talk about for years, Drew.
I second that. The one thing that I feel like every time happens, but when you and me talk about Alex Pereira, is we're almost waiting for the shoe to drop. Because I remember you and I both love the movie Rocky, and I remember in the first Creed movie, Rocky Balboa looks at Adonis Creed and says, "Time takes everyone out. It's undefeated." And you feel Alex Pereira is 37. We're almost at that point where it's like, okay, we're starting to get up there. When is he going to lose? I mean, it seems like we talked about this for 300. We thought that it was going to be another toss-up. We talked about it for 303. We thought it was going to be another toss-up. It seems like every time we talk about this guy, it seems like, when is he going to meet his match? And I almost feel like this could be the fight. I mean, I know it sounds kind of cliche, us talking about it again, but you talk about Magomed Ankalaev, the dude has beat everybody in the UFC that he's fought except for his UFC debut. He's 12-0-1 since his UFC debut, especially with that 1-no contest. That's still talked about as controversy. But this guy hits hard. I think he hits almost as hard as Alex Pereira does. But the one thing that we have never seen Alex Pereira fight is a really good grappler. And you look at Ankalaev, his grappling is very good. I mean, you're not on the level of a prime John Jones, but your grappling in this division he's probably one of the better grapplers in your entire light heavyweight division. I mean, and then you have, on the other hand, is probably one of the greatest light heavyweights we'll ever see in Alex Pereira, who completely speed ran through the UFC. His fourth fight in the UFC, he knocked out Israel Adesanya to win the belt. I mean, that kind of zero to hero just doesn't happen. I think the only time we've ever really seen that was with a guy named John Jones, where he just tore through the UFC. I mean, you talk about probably one of the most decorated kickboxers ever in Pereira. We haven't really seen Ankalaev fight a kickboxer on that level. I really feel like this fight is not going to go the distance. I think you can agree someone is getting knocked out in this fight, especially being a 5-round fight. I think we're going to have to give it to Alex Pereira, just because, in my opinion, he's one of the best light heavyweights I've ever seen. Second only to a prime John Jones.
Drew, you bring up an excellent point there, and it's something that you and I talk about, numerous times, is just, when is that shoe going to drop for Alex Pereira? He's won not even bad, just one injury away from being done. I don't mean like, oh, he's washed, he's going to continue to fight. No, I mean like he is one injury away from being done with the UFC. I mean, you have pretty much taught me his history. He's an old guy. He started late. You see, like with all the everything that UFC has now, Fight Night, Ultimate Warrior, everything that they have. Guys start young and they have a relatively long career. I mean, you're talking about a guy who not that long ago in our lifetimes was an alcoholic, turned his life around and started fighting again. And you're going up against a guy in Magomed who, I mean, from birth has been fighting. It's a tough one to call. I mean, you talk about the shoe to drop. I mean, it's like, I look at it like the Kansas City Chiefs, right? I mean, this past season we talked about it where, it's hard to bet against the Kansas City Chiefs because we haven't seen them lose yet. Well, now we have with the Eagles. And so now you kind of don't, going into next season of the NFL, you don't really put that much into it. And so for the time being, I'm going to go with you and I'm taking Alex Pereira only because I haven't seen him lose at this level yet. Ever since that Adesanya fight, this guy's been on an absolutely another level. This is a guy who got, hit in the groin right where everyone knows where it hurts. Declined to stop the fight and knocked the dude out 10 seconds later. This guy is tough. He's got grit. I'm not, don't take me saying that as a way for me to say Magomed is not that as well. But until I see Pereira lose, at a high level, let me say that. Until I see Pereira lose at a high level, I can't go against them. And so I'm going to take Alex Pereira for this fight.
Yeah, I mean, the one more thing that I want to talk about is with Alex Pereira is that he started his MMA career at middleweight, which is 185, and that's the only two times we've seen him lose. We saw him lose his pro MMA debut at 185, and we saw him lose to Israel Adesanya at 185. And then as soon as he stepped up to 205 and stopped cutting that extra 20 pounds, the dude has been an absolute monster.
He's a tank.
Yeah, I feel like if Alex Pereira is going to lose in the near future, it's going to be to this guy. I mean, this guy has all the tools to beat Alex Pereira. It all depends on who's going to look better coming out of the tunnel on Saturday night, is who is going to hold that belt. I honestly would not be surprised if either one of these guys wins. I think this is probably one of the closest fights I have ever seen odds-wise and in terms of pound-for-pound talent. This is the fight you want to watch.
Yeah, this will definitely be a good one. The last couple of UFCs have been missing that pop, that zing, but I think this is it. For those of you who, like us, who live in Central Time, this fight's not going to start until tomorrow at around 11 or 12 o'clock at night. So definitely drink some coffee or sleep in a little bit tomorrow. Let's go to the final round, the section where we do not talk about the main card of UFC, and I asked Drew a spontaneous question. Drew, you said you really liked this segment, so we're bringing it back. Are you ready for your question today?
Yeah, this is probably one of my favorite segments about the show. Is I like being thrown almost a curveball at the end and having to ask a question that I really didn't sit here and research or prepare any notes for.
And that's why we're doing it. For those of you at home, let me flash you back to a little bit story that happened with me and Drew. Me and Drew work out together. A couple weeks ago, we're doing our cardio. We're like a rest lap. We're just on the treadmills, and Drew looks over at me and he goes, "Hey, Dana White made an announcement today." And I go, "Oh yeah, what's happening?" He goes, "It's happening." And I go, "No, it isn't." He goes, "Yeah, man, it's happening." And I go, "Are you serious?" He goes, "It's happening." For those of you UFC fans out there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. For those of you who may not follow it as intensely as Drew or myself even, apparently, this has been reported on that Jon Jones is finally going to fight Tom Aspinall. This has been the big talk of the UFC for years, right? Jon Jones just had a fight not that long ago back in November, and this has been the one question: when's he fighting Tom Aspinall? So, Drew, your question for you today is, why is this such a big deal? Why is this fight in particular, why does it overshadow any other conversation in UFC circles across the world? Why do people care so much about this hypothetical fight?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not been officially signed and confirmed, but Dana White has said that this is happening and that International Fight Week, which should be June 17th, is always a big card. I mean, Alex Pereira fought on that card a bunch. I mean, that's when you have probably one of the most stacked pay-per-views of the whole year is in that end of June era. So, but to get back to your point of this, I mean, let's go back to the 90s when you had a certain fighter by the name of Mike Tyson. Everybody wanted to watch that guy fight. I have a feeling that John Jones is like that guy. I mean, you talk about the undisputed greatest fighter ever. I mean, ever. Like any promotion, division, John Jones is that guy. I mean, I know Dana White tends to say that a bunch, but you can't fault the guy for.
I never noticed Dana White.
But you can't fault the guy for praising his arguably the UFC's biggest ever superstar. I mean, like I know you're a huge Conor fan, but I feel like John Jones is just on that level of Conor fame, where
well, it almost seems like it's two separate things. I'm a Conor fan because I think Conor is the greatest promotion fighter of all time. That guy. First of all, Conor brought in a lot of fans. I don't think people admit it or realize it. Conor brought in a lot of fans to the UFC, myself included. Doesn't mean he's the best fighter. I mean, he's lost some bad fights, and I mean, recently his personal life has maybe dissuade a couple of people. But you just talk about fighting in the octagon, fenced in, lights are on, everyone's cheering your name. I mean, John Jones is that guy, big boy.
A little bit like John Jones was a little bit too early for us. Like I think we were 7 and 8 when he was making his UFC debut. So I feel like Tom Aspinall could be one of the greatest heavyweights of our generation. But you look on the other side, it's John Jones it's so hard to, bet against the guy. I mean, I can only recall one time when he was an underdog in a fight, and that was against the Cyril Gane fight, which is his first fight at heavyweight. Nobody had ever seen heavyweight John Jones. And he steps in the ring and you just go, oh, okay, he's still John Jones. But on the other hand, you have Tom Aspinall, who's so dominant. I can't even make a prediction on this fight because I think it's so close. I mean, Tom Aspinall said that if I beat John Jones, it doesn't make me the greatest heavyweight ever. It just means I'm the greatest heavyweight right now. I have a feeling that John Jones at one point in time is going to be beatable. I don't know if it's when he's 37 or when he's going to be 57. I mean, he's going to lose, or he has the potential to lose somewhere. But looking at the John Jones that just dismantled the greatest heavyweight ever in Stipe Miocic, I mean, people say Stipe was old, he was 41. Look at the power that guy still had at 41. I mean, you talk about a guy that didn't really hit his prime till his mid 30s when he knocked out Fabricio Verdum in Brazil to get the belt the first time. He was on one leg falling backwards and threw a hook and floored a guy who had a pretty good chin. I mean, you talk about the caliber of fighters that John Jones has fought. He's fought the who's who when they were the who's who. Like, I remember his fights with Daniel Cormier. When the young 21-year-old John Jones just dismantled Shogun Rua to win the belt. I mean, you talk about all the guys that John Jones has fought, it's really, really hard to say, you know what, I'm not going to back John Jones in this fight. So to sum it up, I really think that either one of these guys could win this fight. I think that John Jones definitely has potential, but on the other side, so does Aspinall. So I think my official verdict is I'm undecided. As weird as that sounds.
You are correct, Drew. One day John Jones is going to lose, whether it's an opponent or, like you said, whether it's time itself. We'll have to wait and see. But that's going to do it for this episode of Inside the Fence, brought to you by No Game Schedule. Drew, as always, thank you for coming on, and make sure you turn in to UFC 313 tomorrow, Saturday, March 8th, and make sure you tune into the light heavyweight title bout, Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev. And we'll see what happens then. But from me and Drew, thank you all very much and have a good night and tomorrow.